Welcome back to What's New with Mead. We're in episode 63. Oh, goodness. 63. Words are slurring already. And I have Carlos from Texas Longhouse Mead to chat all about his meadery that's up and coming. We're going to have you be a little window into what real life is like, Carlos, for anyone who's sitting here listening to the podcast going, I'm going to start a meadery. First of all, we encourage you to. But two, let's be realistic. So, Carlos, tell us about the meadery.
Well, there's a lot of people who've followed you, know that I've been here several times and I've talked about wanting to open my own meadery. Well, luckily I've been able to work everything out to where I've been funded for the meadery, which, I've talked to several different meaderies trying to gauge of what's a good amount to start with. And I've heard everything from, we started with $10,000 to we started with $200,000. And I'm like, so trying to get an idea of, well, what do I really need to start is hard because,
right.
There's no one out there or there's no guideline to say, hey, you need this, do that.
Right.
And so the first thing you got to do is how are you going to fund it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been several years in the making. Everything finally came together, and now I got the funding for it, and so it's go time now.
Yeah.
So after that, the next step was getting the LLC, which some of that stuff is common sense. We're starting a business, you got to have something that says I'm a business, and that's getting your LLC.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have your LLC. There's no specific LLCs for alcohol or anything like that. But then when you're setting up your business, you got to decide how you want your business structured as to which type of LLC you're getting. So no one told me that. So I'm sitting there having to read pages and pages and look into, all right, what does this LLC do? What does this LLC type do? What does that one do? And so finally found the one for starting out, and so that's what I'm going with. It's a LLC that's going to be taxed through the IRS as a corporation. So
cool. So there's a lot of elements to this, and obviously dealing with money. Then you want to do it in a legit way that's not going to get you in trouble. So talking about LLCs, and there is smart ways to go about it, and I think you are obviously investigating that and trying to do it in a way that's going to be best suited for your ventures. But then there's also obviously recipe development and everything behind. We're talking about in the moment your the start of this business, but I think you could take it all the way back to your recipe development. And so let's
yeah, that's that goes way back several years. And some you hear all the time, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody from or saying that your meats aren't delicious the first several times you make it. But it's repeatability is the question.
Mm-hmm.
So I have over 300 different meats that I've made, different variations of one meat. So I had for instance, a mango habanero, mango reaper, mango this, mango pineapple, mango this, Yep. So, the list goes on, but it's repeatability. And, this is also another reason why I encourage people to send to competitions to get quality feedback.
Mm-hmm.
The meat community is such I don't want to say tight-knit community because there's some different variations within the meat community. Because, for example, with competitions, I've had 15 different awards that I won that I've sent to one competition that scored a 27, sent it to the next one, and it scored a 47. So there's different, and it was literally, they came out of the same carboy.
Yeah.
And drastic changes in scores. Mm-hmm. So, things happen in shipping, things happen temperature-wise, stuff happens. We get it. Corks, you got a bad cork or something, so it's still semi-oxidized. You run into issues like that, your cappers and so on and so forth. So, you want to start with repeatability. You want to be able to make the same mead that tastes the same constantly.
Yep.
So that's, you get the people like, oh, this is my first time making this batch and it's delicious. So they're going to think it's always delicious. Well, you need to make sure it's repeatable.
Yeah.
So the process has to be the same. The way you do things, not, you can change the way you do things, but in the end, make it the same.
Yeah.
So,
well, and there's a lot of that too. So repeatability. And then also, I think a lot of people start or want to start a meadery and they go, okay, well, I have this recipe that everybody loves. And it's a no water mixed berry mead. And like my grandma loves it. Everybody loves it. It's like, okay, well, that's awesome. Super glad you got that. How are you going to scale that up? I think that's a big thing too, is like, you can't just take any recipe and say, this is going to be commercially viable because of price point. Like if you were saying, trying to do the Ken Schramm's thing of, I'm going to make these berry bombs that are super sweet, you're going to run into some huge issues with that because that's just a lot of money. And so people have to take that into consideration. Yes, your mom, whoever, parents, family might love that recipe, but should you be taking it to a commercial level, or should you maybe backpedal a little bit and say, how can I make this a more financially stable product for you? So as you were like taking all these things into consideration, people who like your recipes and all these things and changing things about them, how did you end up paring down to what I'm assuming you probably have 3 to 7 things you're ready to brew. These are your standards. How'd you come down to those specific ones?
So coming down to the specific ones that I wouldn't necessarily call them, I guess you can call them my flagship, but they're some of the ones that I get requested a lot. And some of them are also ones that I won awards with, but are ones that are going to take time to, like my whiskey barrel aged Bochet Acer blends. That's almost a 1.5-year project, mead. Yeah. So it's not like I'm going to open a meadery and be like, here it is. No, that's you got to have something that you can not crank out rather fast, but isn't going to take 2 years to try to, make a profit off of, or even start to sell to try to make a profit off of. So starting out, and then, it's no good if some of my recipes are already out there. I share it with the community. I have, put them on YouTube sometimes, but simplicity is what I'm starting with. So like my lemon drop hop lemon mead, I cranked that out with Kavike, and I've scaled it from 1 gallon to 5 gallons to 15 gallons. It's not quite linear, but it's very close to where it's not going to take a lot of adjustment to get it back to what I made it at. So things like that. Like my mango habanero one, that one cranks out rather quickly because I've kind of had to change my recipes a little bit, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, how we go from this recipe to commercial recipes. Well, some of them, like my mango habanero, I've used whole mangoes, lots of mangoes actually.
Every form.
Trying to get that much mango, which is possible because everybody does it, but trying to start out to where you start getting product out, you got to kind of start playing with things. So I started playing with the purees from like Vintner's Best or whatever. So I've been kind of adjusting and changing my recipes to start using those. They're basically wine bases, but the mixes. So I've been playing with the recipes for the last, year now, trying to convert everything over to what can I use to help cut costs while still trying to maintain the same flavor. Yeah. So,
I feel that.
And a lot of people don't think about that because, like you said, they're like, oh, this berry, which, it's a no water berry, takes 45 pounds of berries for this 3 gallon. Well, commercially, you're going
hundreds, thousands of pounds.
Yeah. So, even for like 50, because I talked to some of my friends who have their own meadery now, and they're like, oh, yeah, we started our first batch was 50 gallons just to kind of get things going. Well, you're doing a 50-gallon batch, 40 pounds to get, just 3 gallons. Now you're trying to go to 50.
Yeah.
That price skyrockets fast.
Yeah. You're mentioning that changing of your recipe to be commercially viable, especially with fruit. I'm experiencing that again. I should say this. I'm not, I don't have my trigger finger ready to pull on a Meadery yet. Maybe one day, but I'm starting to think about that with like my apple cinnamon mead, which is one that I love to make. I've got it down at the homebrew scale. I mean, I feel like I've got that recipe pretty dialed in. Now, the problem is it uses a lot of apples in a variety of apples. And of course, that's the process of cutting them up. And if they're supermarket apples, then you have to boil them to get the wax off. And so like you start to think about these elements of, okay, well, what if I want to make 150 gallons of this? My apple ratio at that point would be something like, what's my thing? It's like 15 pounds for 5 gallons. Somewhere in the hundreds of pounds of apples and slicing and all of that stuff. It's just not totally feasible. So I've been kind of messing with the recipe some to try and dial back the amount of actual apples I'm adding, still giving some variety, adding some more like concentrates and things to maybe bolster that apple flavor, but just making it more commercially friendly. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not as fun because it's like, it's like a child. You're like, I've created this thing and I'm so proud of this recipe, but now, nope, not anymore. We're going to start take away all these little elements of it. But it's also a little sciencey because you're like, how can I come out with the same product? There is a way, but it takes a lot of this trial and error, which you have obviously done to get where you're at this point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to mention as well, when people start talking about ingredients, is, and I didn't know this, and luckily I have friends in the industry that were like, hey, by the way, you got to have this. So once you start using, if you're not using like whole fruits or whatever, and you start using other adjuncts, I forget what it's called, but it's basically a identification number for the TTB to be like, okay, yes, this is a safe ingredient to put into the wine. Oh. And if you don't have that, they'll start rejecting your recipe. So all these people are like, oh, throw some of this, throw some of that in there, and it's good. On the homebrew scale, fantastic. Yeah. When you're trying to go commercial, nobody really tells you these things unless you have friends in the industry and they're like, hey, by the way, you got to have this. And some of it's just like an information sheet, especially like concentrates and stuff like that, juices, different off the wall ingredients that if it's not just whole fruit by itself, you got to have like an information sheet. I really wish I could remember what it was. I have it written down because it's.
Do you have an example of like a specific thing you ran into so far already?
Not quite, because I haven't had to submit any recipes to the TTV yet. Because I don't have, I started my application for my license, but I'm waiting for, kind of jumping ahead here, I'm waiting on the county to actually assign an address to my building.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Because we're literally, right now, where my building is going is a pile of dirt.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you're a very active member of my Discord and of the Doing the Most Discord and Mead Hall, and you're kind of around all those places. And YouTube, you obviously are doing things on YouTube, but specifically you have shared a photo of this basically plot of land, and you said this is the future site, and it's kind of fun to see because I remember you talked about already like I'm going to go and rent this place, and then you're like, well, this is not working out, and so how did you end up deciding converting from, well, I'm going to rent or do all this stuff to, you know what, I'm just going to build? What happened there?
So the hardest thing, and, my friends, Bryce and Savannah with Fox and Raven Meadery, I was over there helping them do some small work around their Meadery, and we got talking. I was like, yeah, I'm ready. I got the money, this and that. It's time to start looking for a building. They're all like, they laughed at me, looked at each other, looked back at me, and laughed again. I was like, what? And they're all like, good luck finding a building. So I was like, oh, they told me it's hard. You're gonna have some places that will just be like, oh, what do you want to do? I want to open a winery. And I've literally had one dude tell me, oh no, it's alcohol. You're gonna blow my building up.
What?
No, like they literally had to get a paper from the fire marshal, like it's not gonna blow your building up. And they're like, oh, okay, come on in.
It's
But
just CO2, man. It's not anything else. Don't worry.
yeah, and so you know, then unless you're in the commercial industry, there's different types of rent, which I didn't know about. And so they're like, oh, we have, oh, the rent here is, $2,000 a month. Oh, that's within what I was budgeting. But like, and then on top of that, there's triple net. And I was like, what's triple net? Nobody told me about this triple net stuff. Well, now triple net is you're paying for building maintenance, you're paying for the property tax, and you're paying for the building insurance
Interesting.
on top of your rent. You're like, oh, so sometimes that'll double the rent, but it sounds good because you're like, oh, rent's only $2,000, triple net's another $2,000, so now you're paying $4,000 a month and some of the places I was looking at were 1,200 square feet.
Man, that's crazy.
You're paying $4,000 for that, and I'm like, oh, no. So, you run into some of those, and you find some really good deals, like, oh, it's $800, but triple net again, but the triple net is still $2,000. You're back to 2,800. It's like, didn't you? This is not what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And nobody tells you that until you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So, found a couple other buildings. They were really interested. They're like, oh, that sounds interesting. The building fits and is not tailored, but you would fit into the space. I was like, cool. Hey, by the way, I need to cut a slit trench for a drain right here. They're all like, what do you mean? Well, we got to cut the concrete to put a drain in for the, when you're dumping waste and stuff like that from the tanks. They're like, oh, yeah, you can't cut the concrete here, which I get. It's their building. They can say yay or nay to what they want. And that was the issue I was running into, is nobody was letting me put a drain in. And depending on the city and the county you're in, or even the state sometimes, but everywhere I'm at, you have to have a drain in the production area. Right. So everywhere I went, I was like, I need to put a drain in. Oh, yeah, we can put a drain in. They thought I was talking about like a drain hose, just to a little drain. Right. No, I need a drain. Oh yeah, we can't do that. So it several months of looking and talking to people and talking to the landlords and property owners and this and that. And it was like, you can't do that. No, we don't want that here. Oh, you're going to bring in a bad crowd that we don't want. It's like, it's a winery. Like, yes, it's still alcohol, but it's mead. Mead's not cheap. You're not going to bring in.
No. If anything, you're going to get the more snobby, like wine snob. And then sometimes there's mead snob, where you're like, it's above wine snob. Like, we are almost worse than wine snobs.
Yeah, it can be. So, I was like, all right, fine. And luckily for me, we're having part of our house renovated right now. And the guy that owns the renovation company was like, oh yeah, it's just, we're just, talking on the side, waiting for guys to come in and do some work. And he's like, yeah, after this, I got to go close on this property. And so I just got talking to him. I was like, yeah, what kind of property you got? He's like, oh, I got these 3 acres out here. It's in the county. So, there's not a whole lot of regulations out there. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to put up some buildings and try to rent them out. I was like,
yeah,
really? Piqued my interest, sir. Yeah. So,
like, no regulations, you say?
Yeah. And so, like, there is, like, we still got to follow the Texas or the TABC, which is the Texas Alcohol Commission. We still got to follow their regulations, but the county is like, oh, you want to put a winery out here? Cool, have fun. So Whereas like some of the cities, like, all right, you want to put a winery here. All right, you need to do this. You need to have this much. You can only do this. You can only do that. You can only go
Oh,
here. Where in the county, it's like, cool, have at it.
yeah.
So
Have fun.
the only thing we got to do is permit the building, which we're in the process of doing now. So yeah.
Well, you shared some photos too, and so I'm curious. Um, Now knowing that this started with a conversation, and the guy had already planned on building things. So the photos you shared, are those ideas that you had, or are those like, well, he was already going to create these specific buildings, and this is what he was going to do?
No, he's like he asked me, he's like, well, what would you need? And I basically told him I want a little tap room, nothing crazy. Like the whole building is about 1,700 square feet,
Hmm.
which is I think it's a relatively good size, especially when you're first starting out.
Right.
And then I was like, this is what I need. I need a trench. I need water lines here, or I would need water lines that were in this area, that area. Got to have the bathroom, you know, everything else. He's like, all
That's
right,
sweet.
tell me. He's like, tell me more. I was like, so I kind of made a rough drawing of what I was thinking. He's like, okay. And then a couple days later, like he sent me a couple of renditions. He's like, hey, what do you think of this? I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, would this fit your needs? I was like, I would need this. I would need that. I need this a little bit more bigger. And he's like, sends me another edition. How about this? I was like, are you like asking me for my input on how to build your building? He's like, well, tell me what building you need and I'll build you the building.
Man.
All right. So I literally laid out everything of what I needed, and he did the final rendition of it. He's like, will this work for you? So I was like,
Sweet.
yes. And he's building it the way I need it to be built for the Meadery.
That's
So,
sweet.
like he's not an investor. He's just owns the property, but he's literally building it to the exact specifications that I need.
Sweet. So
So
are you still renting in a way then from him?
yeah, we'll rent it out. It's just a 3-year commitment. It's all he's asking for. So I was like, all right, cool, I can do that.
Yeah.
So that will give me at least a 3-year window to see how the meadery's going. If it's because this is just something for me to actually keep my hands busy because my wife's retired military and I'm pretty much retired. So I literally don't have anything to do. And so I'm doing this meadery one because I love mead and
Hmm.
I enjoy it. And a lot of other people enjoy it.
Yeah.
so, um, so if the meadery is just running itself with with the revenue it's generating, then I'll stay there. But if if it starts to create a relatively good profit after 3 years, then we're looking at my ultimate goal for this is to build a replica Viking longhouse to put the meadery into.
Ooh, that'd be cool. Yeah,
So,
man.
but
That'd be
if it
true to
doesn't,
your
if it
name.
doesn't get there, what's that?
That'd be true to your name.
Yeah,
The
it would.
Longhouse. Yeah. That's awesome.
That's the ultimate dream for me. Just you got to have goals for yourself. So that's my goal. That's my dream. But if the meadery just maintains itself without having to put in extra money, then I'll just stay where I'm at.
Yeah. So your building layout, you talked about having a tap room, which I know is unique to a lot of places because, I mean, I feel like people always want to have a tap room, but in even some of the breweries I've been in, they don't always have a tap room. It's just a production space. So I think that's really fun. When you're designing your commercial space, part of this is like, I guess here's a question. What's your starting batch size? Like, you're going to scale up eventually. Is there a point where you're going to be capping out at, I don't know, 5 barrels or whatever the size is?
So, like in the wine industry, they go a lot by liters and not so much barrels. Like
Mm-hmm.
the beer industry does barrels, the wine industry does liters. As I'm finding out, because everything's like, oh, liters this, liters that. I'm like, well, so I got to sit there and do the math to convert liters into barrel sizes. That way I can be like, okay, because something like the bright tanks. The bright tanks are done in barrels,
Oh,
but
okay.
the wine tanks are all done in liters. So you're like, will that fermentation tank finish go into that bright tank? So you got to sit
Yeah.
there and do the math for that. I really haven't. One thing that I've always been told is by a couple meaderies. Like I went to Texas Meat Fest last year or the year before. I don't remember. Oh, I didn't go this year, but I definitely went last year. Was you want to have equipment that you can grow into, because if not, you're going to buy equipment to start with, and then a year or two later, you're having to get bigger equipment. Well, now
Yeah.
you're spending twice the money, because wine tanks are definitely not cheap.
Yeah.
So, luckily for me, I found a cidery that uses the exact same equipment as a meadery, bright tanks, Latina wine tanks and everything else that went out of business, unfortunately, due to COVID when they shut down. And so now they're like, we just need to get rid of it. Well, I reached out to the guy. He's like, come get it. So
That's awesome.
here in a couple of weeks, me and a couple of buddies are flying out there, renting a big old box truck. And it's 3 storage units full of equipment.
Wow.
Load it up in the box truck and drive it back.
That's crazy. So you posted which I thought was really fun. You've been very transparent in this whole thing, which I also find interesting. A lot of people, when they get into the business of things, as I've talked to meaderies and people, that for good reason, withhold certain things. And I love that you've been pretty transparent about this whole process. One of those things you shared was kind of like a grandmaster list of everything that was going to go in the meadery. And down to like even some of the dollar amounts on some of that stuff. And I thought that was really fun to just go through. And if anyone wants to check this out, it's on the Man-Made Me Discord. And Carlos has shared it somewhere in there. I'll try and dig it up again to where it's kind of around again. But essentially, it's like stuff I hadn't thought about, but is relevant to a meadery. And it goes from, of course, like bright tanks and pumps and all that, and then you're like, you've included like, well, we also need like a bunch of tables too, and we need like this and this and this, and so it's just really fun to like look at that and go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I need some mops. I need to be able to mop up my floor. I probably need to have that. I need to be able to sweep the floor. I might need a vacuum. Like all those things that are small that you never really factor in until you get to the place and you're like, oh crap, I spent all my money on this honey, but now I can't sweep up my floor because I didn't buy a broom. So it's
it's literally some of the simplest stuff too, like you're saying, and tables, chairs. You got to build out your bar. Getting a cold room with. Don't remember how cold it gets, but you can, if you have a bright tank that's not jacketed, which is what helps cool it down with the glycol chillers. You got to stick that bright tank somewhere cold for it to carbonate, where it's going to take twice as long.
Yeah.
So now you're sitting on product that you can't push out because it's taking longer to carbonate. So it's a 8x12 cold room that is big enough that we can roll the bright tanks in and out of. Light fixtures. You got some basic, neon fluorescent lights or whatever. But the light, if you're trying to make it your own personal space, light fixtures. Never even thought of it until I was talking to a couple of people like, oh yeah, light fixtures. So I was like, and light fixtures, depending on what you get, aren't cheap either.
Right.
So, everyone's like, oh, I want this tank. I want that tank. I want, these big glycol chillers. Well, you might have to settle for a smaller one because you need lights in your space.
Right. Yeah.
Like, the fluorescent lights work, but is it the space you're trying to create for your metering?
Yeah.
And so I was like, and of course, some people want entertainment. So TVs. Now you got to have a way to, you got to have something to put on the TV. So now you're putting cables, and then of course behind the bar, taps, kegs, everything behind that. Well, now how are you going to wash the kegs? What kind of kegs are you getting? If you're just doing in tap room sales or whatever, ball lock kegs are fine. Well, I plan on getting some restaurant distribution like brass taps and stuff like that. Well, now they want Sankey kegs. Okay, well, how big of a keg do they want? 5 gallon, 10 gallon, 15 gallon?
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
So now you got to have a way to wash that. Now you got to have the equipment that also fills those kegs. And it's
Hmm.
just like, oh man. So it's the little things that nobody really talks about when getting into the industry until you're already in it. And you're like, oh, you're pulling your hair out, trying to catch back up.
Yeah.
So
That could, like, this whole thing could be a great thing for you as you're just walking through the process to, like, for lack of a better term, create plan, a semi plan for Meadery starting people, and say, like, here are the things that maybe that's what we're doing right now, but saying, like, I want to do this, but here are these things to consider. Because you're right, I think a lot of people get into it, and maybe some people don't plan on doing kegs or having a tap room at all, and that's great too. However you want to operate. But regardless, you're going to have to get your product out there. And I think the truth is, unfortunately, like, just putting your stuff in bottles and taking it to is it Total Wine or stuff like that that's in, in Texas and all those things might not be enough. Because mead is not quite at the point where people are like, oh, I see that on the shelf. I want to buy that. It's like, what is that? Oh my gosh, that's $30 for that $3.75. I don't think I could do that, And so
yeah,
the whole tap room thing is like a great way to start somebody, get them hooked in, say, hey, check out my lemon drop hopped mead. And then next thing you know, you're pouring all your other varietals in there. But
yeah,
taking it back to just building that meadery, if you don't have a plan to hook people in the first place via that way, you have to be strategic on how you get your product out there. So I'm really curious to see what this tap room looks like, because it's going to be fun to, right now we're living in this like ethereal space of like this is what I want, and here are the lights, and here's all the decorations. It's going to be so fun one day to walk in and just be like, here it is. And it might be totally different than what your dream is in this current moment, but it's still going to be so fun to see
yeah.
it evolve.
And I've already had to, because right now the building is basically just a shell. Everything inside, aside from the trench, I'm having to kind of configure and be like, all right, we're going to put this here. We're going to have to put that there. And I sent, the rendition that I had, I sent that to one of my dear friends, Tracy. She had her own meadery before. And she's like, oh, well, you had that there and that over there. But do you have the drain to connect that? Because I had the sink.
Oh, yeah.
I had the sink somewhere. And she's like, oh, well, I forgot what she was telling me. I had to go look at my messages, but she's like, it would make sense if you move this around and move that over there and put that there. And so I kind of redesigned it, and I was like, that makes a lot more sense. So,
Right.
like you're saying, you got these grand ideas of, oh, this is what it's going to look like, until you get in there and start putting things there, and you're like, it can't go there. It's got to go over there. Now
Right.
you're having to scramble and move things around again. So, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to redesign part of it again to kind of make everything fit, but
That's
we'll see.
part of it, though. That's just, I mean, where you're at, and it's not a bad thing. I love that you're also asking other people for help. I think going back to mead makers can be really, there's like, I feel like there's two types of mead makers. There's ones that are like super ready to share things, want to just be helpful. Like, you're just like, here, take my mead. I just want to, like, let's just do all these things because I want to help you. And then there's like the, unfortunately, more snobby part of the mead people who are like, these are trade secrets that I won't tell you even, what kind of blueberries I use. And it's like, kind of that kind of vibe. And for you to say to all these people, hey, what do you think about this, is very telling of your way you brew. And honestly, what this meadery is going to be, when people walk in, they're going to walk into a place that's not just been vetted by one person, but by many people that's had lots of brains like investing in it. And I think that's going to make it even better. It's going to make it just a commercially, I can't say that word, stable thing. And it's going to be fun just to like see all of those ideas smashed into one. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. The reason I'm so open as well is because, like, when I started doing this, I was like, all right, what do I need to do? And like you were saying, like some people are just like, I can't tell you everything. Just as simple as, hey, what kind of RO system or what kind of water system are you using?
Right.
That's kind of it's water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. So, luckily I've had I became good friends with, other meaderies, and I've gone to like Texas Meat Fest and talking to those commercial meaderies down there. A lot of them are willing to help if you just ask and aren't trying to be like, hey, give me all your inside information. It's just like, hey,
Right.
look, I'm kind of struggling with this. Can you point me in a direction?
Yeah.
And there's a couple people on your Discord and doing the most Discord that have expressed the expressed the willingness to open their own meadery.
Hmm.
And so I've had some of them reach out to me and be like, hey, we're kind of, well, some of them are in Texas as well. They're like, so like, how do we do this?
Hmm.
And then, so just helping each other out is you're gonna get a better connection. Because if I start running into issues to where, my honey supplier is not helping or moved or something, or bottles,
Right.
hey dude, I need you got a couple cases of bottles and I can't get any cases of bottles. Can we work something out? Can I buy some off of you? So that's the mentality I'm trying to go into of, I'm going to help you, you help me.
Yeah.
And then, we're just repaying each other,
Well,
basically.
there's an
So,
element of like competition too. We're talking about, I think people get worried because they're like, well, if I tell you my secrets, you're going to make my mead. It's like, the truth is no. Like, a great example is you've published recipes on YouTube. Somebody could follow your exact recipe. They could buy the
but
same honey you bought somehow magically. And they could do all of these things and still end up with a little bit of a different product. And it's just because the nature of the beast, and it's yeast and water and honey, obviously terroir and all those things. So like, yes, I understand holding things back, but you're never really going to make the same product as someone else.
yeah.
And so that's just something, I don't
And
know.
for like me, making my lemon drop me commercial, and somebody else is trying to make it. To be honest, I stole the idea from another bakery. You know,
Yeah.
like Breeding Hive's lemon mead.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite summer session meads to drink. And I was like, I want to make my own lemon mead.
Hmm.
It's still a lemon mead, but it tastes completely different than ours. But I want to make my lemon mead and make it something that's mine.
Yeah.
So, you know,
That's what we
I don't
do
know.
as musicians. Like, musicians do that all the time. It's literally just stealing from other people in a lot of ways, especially drummers. I'm a drummer, and when I grew up, I don't think I ever really created anything original in my world. I just like listened to, oh, here's Blink 182, and like, oh, I want to do what he's doing, and then like here's Sum 41, and I want to do this, and so just like every band I would listen to, and I would just steal their idea and just go, oh, look, it's my idea now. And of course, people would hear it and go, that's a cool thing you just did. And I would very rarely be like, I took it from somebody else. But there's a lot of like influence that comes with other things. Now, obviously, if I say all those things about the recipe, if you were taking Carlos's recipe and producing it on a commercial scale and calling it your own, that is a little bit different. I
Well,
think
yeah,
there's a layer of like, you got to have your own little twist. You took
yeah,
the Meridian Hive idea and you said, I'm going to twist it up a little bit. I want to put, obviously, Meridian Hive's not using hops in theirs, in that specific
yeah.
one I'm thinking of. You were like, let's add the hop element. So it's a different thing. If you just basically took Meridian Hive lemon mead and just did the same thing, it'd be like, well, that's good, but it's hard to say like, this was original. This is my full idea kind of situation.
Well, I don't like. I kind of know how they make their lemon mead.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know fully, but like I know they don't use like whole lemon juice basically, like I did.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course the hops thing, like even if somebody else wanted to make the lemon mead, and they're like, oh, we're gonna add hops to ours too, but they add a different type of hop. It's gonna come out with a different flavor. And hey, commercially, yeah, it's different. It's something that, you know, a juicy IPA at one brewery is gonna be different than a
Yeah.
juicy IPA, even though it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But whatever.
If I've learned anything, especially from beer brewing, mead, I feel like is maybe a little more. You can get akin to each product if you use the same yeast and you try to stay in certain ranges. Beer brewing is so versatile when it comes to like mash temperatures and all of that. That has blown my mind. Where you
Mm.
like, if you mash your beer at 149 Fahrenheit, you'll get this product. But then if you mash it at 151, you'll get a different one. And so like those, I mean, that's 2 degrees of a difference, and it can totally change a product.
Yeah.
So I've learned that the brewery thing, the beer is pretty hard. I thought mead was hard. I think my next step into brewing is going to be trying to like do pretty well with beer. And I'm like probably 15, 20 batches in, and I'm still like pulling my hair out sometimes on a brew day, especially when they're like 8 hours long, and you're like, I've been boiling these hops for like for like 4 hours. Like, what's going on here? So it's very different. But your recipes, you have all these established recipes. You've already started planning sizes on how to go, how to get there.
Yeah.
How do you? I'm sure you've been sourcing honey. Have you already started looking around and figuring out how to locally or maybe not locally source your bulk honey you're going to have to purchase?
Yeah. And again, this is one of the things I love about the Discord community is um, I got talking with another member in the Discord who I don't want to throw his name out there because like he's made it public that he's already submitted his license and everything like that. Uh, but I don't know where he's at in the whole process, so I don't want to throw him out there. But I've talked to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, hey, look, I reached out to these honey suppliers, and here's the list." And he just gave me a list of the
Whoa,
quotes, and I was like, "Oh, thanks,"
that's super cool.
And so again, because him and I've talked on the side. Oh, help me with this. I've helped him with that. We've talked back and forth. Now we're exchanging information on bulk honey supply. Oh, here's this list. Oh, well, here, take this list out. So we're him and I are going back and forth. So it's one thing that I'm grateful for y'all's community because I've been able to make connections along the way, and some of those have worked out professionally. So
That's awesome. I love that. I love that we've been able to kind of be a little community that's supported each other too.
one thing I wanted to throw out there, not to kind of get away
Yeah.
from sourcing equipment or honey or whatever, but one thing I've looked in uh, 7 different cities trying to open this meadery, and you have to really dig into the zoning regulations to figure out if you'll even be able to do it. Because like one city they're like, oh yeah, you can open your winery here. 40% of your sales have to be non-alcohol.
Oh yeah. I feel like I remember you saying something about this, like as you were planning part of it.
And so that's one thing we didn't want to get tied to. Like we plan on having food, but I don't want to get tied to having to serve 40% of our sales being food.
Yeah.
So, it's starting out because in the one that's going to add more expenses into your things. Now you got to plan to have a kitchen put in. You got to plan for your food license as well,
Yeah.
health inspections, and so on and so forth. So that's just adding on to the cost. So luckily, I'm in a place where we're not tied to a percentage of non-alcohol sales.
That's nice.
So,
Well, that's huge too. I mean, again, back to what we're doing here. We're talking about people considering opening a meadery. There are a lot of laws, and you really have to be diligent to check your specific state, county, area in general, what on earth they expect you to do. Because obviously, you probably had no idea that was going to be the case when you were like 2 years ago, and you're cooking up whatever mead you're making. You're just like, I'm going to do this professionally one day, and then somebody's like, oh yeah, cook some fries with it too, and you're like, what? What do you mean? So
Yeah.
that's just something that to do some research, and a lot of this comes down to what we're talking about tonight: doing research to try and understand what is expected of you as you are creating this meadery or whatever you're wanting to do in that circumstance. But
on top of that, you got to look at like you were saying, there's different laws. Some cities I had to have one parking space for every 100 square feet. Other places they're like, oh, it's one parking space for every 500 square feet.
Oh, weird.
So that's one thing I didn't think about either until I was like, oh yeah, by the way, you got to do this.
Yeah.
You're like, what? So now you're having to find a space that has the parking to go along with it.
Yeah.
Because there was a couple of places I was like, this would be fantastic location. Nope. You only allow 3 parking spaces per spot. You're like, well, this is a 1,600 square foot space.
Yeah.
I need anywhere from 16 spaces to 8 spaces. You're like, nope. So
that's wild, man.
That was another thing that caused me to not caused me, but remove some of my prospective locations is because parking.
Right. That's weird. So earlier we talked about your recipes, submitting them to the TTB and getting them confirmed. Is that a process you do before you start the brewing itself, or are you brewing the mead and then you're submitting the recipe and then you are putting the label on and then going?
So everybody I've talked to in Texas, because everywhere's different. If I'm not going to sell the mead, I can brew the mead, experiment with the brew in the meadery. I can't sell it, but clients come in, hey, it's a free mead. Here, try this. Tell me what you think.
Yeah.
Oh, this is really good, or I don't like it. All right, cool. Let's change it up a little bit.
Yeah.
That, so you can do that. But once, all right, this is the meat I'm going to make to sell. All right, then you need to submit that to the TTB. Well, when you submit it to the TTB, you have to list every single ingredient, every single step. Step 1, put water. Step 2, add honey. Step 3, add the yeast. Step 4, nutrients. Step 5, this. And if you mix those up, there's no, let's just move it around. You got to delete, add your ingredient, and then go back and continue on. So it's a tedious process.
So do they care about honey varietal? You have to say this has specifically mesquite blossom honey, and I used Lalvin D47. Like, do you have to be that specific, or is it just this is water and honey and yeast and cherries or whatever?
That answer I don't know, because again I haven't had to submit a recipe, but
that'll
just
be answered
the general.
So that'll be answered next time.
I'll have that answer for you. But as far as I'm using this type of cherry, I'm using this type of yeast. That part I don't know, but I just know like you have to list every single ingredient, even to the yeast energize or the Go Firm, the Fermate O, like everything that's going into it.
Yeah. So the safe bet there is then you're probably submitting your recipe and then brewing the thing, because if they came back and said, yeah, you can't add that, and then you're like, well, crap, I added like 50 pounds of it, you're probably in trouble. So,
well, that part, like that's what I was saying, like you can, like I have my, my 15-gallon fermenters, but I also have my 5-gallon ones. So I'm still going to run 5-gallon test batches to see for like new meats that I haven't done yet, or if I need to change something. So I'll still be able to run those small ones to give away and get feedback from people in the tap room. But it's only the recipes that you're going to sell that have to get approved.
You need to have like when people come in, be like, this is off the grid. And it's like the sampler of like things you're trying out. And then people be like, hey, what's off the grid this time? And you're like, hey, here's this, I feel like that'd be a fun little gimmick for people to come in and see what you're cooking up. Something new. That'd be kind of fun. So
as long as you don't get them drunk on the free stuff.
Well, I assume you're like, you're probably getting them like a little 1 ounce, like a tiny pour of it. You're probably not going too far with it, I would assume at least. Unless they kept coming back for more, that's where it'd be a little bit. You'd be like, you're too far on the grid. You got to get off the grid.
Right.
So
you got to get back in.
Yeah. So you talked about your 15-gallon systems and things you've been using, and you're still going to be brewing. I assume that everything you do now will be done at the Meadery, probably, whenever you open it up. Even testing.
What I have here on the counter is the last of my homebrew.
Whoa.
So, because...
How's that feel?
What's that?
How does that feel? He's very. You could tell. You could see the thoughts in his eyes. He's really. I was crying. Audio listeners, he's crying. Oh my gosh! I can't believe Carlos is crying right now.
I got mixed emotions about it because I still want to keep making meat. I still want to keep trying new recipes, but I'm at that point now to where I need to start using the money professionally and not just.
Yeah, it's a balance now. That's a new balance for you. It's like you have a sandbox, but your sandbox has probably gotten a little smaller, and now you're having to like actually allocate things.
Yeah. So, like I'll still be doing small batch sizes at the Meadery. Like I said, toying with new things, trying new recipes out, and here try this. Tell me what you think.
Right.
But as far as saying, oh yeah, this is homebrew. That's it.
So is there anything left for the YouTube channel at this point? What's the status of that? Actually,
yes. I've started it already. It's it's several month process. I'm experimenting with different cork varieties. So, well, not cork varieties, closures. Okay. So I'm going to have, the traditional beer bottle cap, swing top.
Okay.
And then synthetic tea corks, cork tea corks, synthetic corks, and regular corks.
Oh.
And because, everyone's like, oh, don't use tea corks. They're only good for sampling. Well, you know how many meaderies use tea corks on their bottles?
Yeah.
I'm looking at 6 right now on the shelf on the camera. Commercial meaderies. Yes, the intention behind commercial meaderies is you buy the product, you drink the product. So it's not something that's going to be sitting around like a Schramm's mead or whatever.
Right.
Or a Pips collection mead or whatever. So the tea corks they're intended to be drank rather soon than save and hold for later. But some of these I've had for over a year now.
Yeah.
But so I got a video on where I actually went and bought the Vimetrica SC300 with the pH meter SO2 probe, and I bought the dissolved oxygen probe to go with it.
That's a big purchase.
Yeah. That was, I want to say it was about $500 just for that. And I literally bought that. Well, one, because I can still use it on the commercial side. And
right.
it's a good tool to have on the homebrew side too, if you got the money for it. But I literally bought that setup to test this cork theory. And so I have one big batch that's sitting in the corner or it was sitting in the corner. I just started the video last week. And so everything's in bottles now. And probably next week I need to open my, not control, but because the whole batch I tested the sulfite in it, pH, that way it was all the same.
Yep.
And then put them all in bottles But then when you bottle, uh, when it mixes with some of the oxygen, some of the metabisulfite will get used up during the
Right.
bottling process. So I have one bottle that I plan on opening like 2 to 3 weeks after we bottle to test to see what the SO2 difference would be
Huh.
from bottling. What got used up, and then I'm going to compare that 6 months from now to all the other closures. So the bottle cap, the swing top, T corks, and
Uh-huh.
the regular corks, and I'm going to test the SO2 and use the dissolved oxygen to see how much oxygen, or because it'll oxidize
Mm-hmm.
potentially with T corks, how much oxygen got in. It'll give you a reading. So
Interesting.
we'll see.
That's a super fun video. I love that. Man, I'm looking forward to that because I'm curious too. That is a big topic, and you're right. There are a lot of meaderies that just do the T cork thing, and I've always wondered that. So that'll be kind of fun to have some more concrete evidence of like what's really happening. So I can't remember what the brand is. So that there's a company that sent me a while back a digital refractometer, and
Nice.
they were like, I did a little plug for them in a video. On their website they had the same thing you're talking about, and I was like, hey, I think I could really get some good use out of out of this thing. And it was like a $700 system or something like that, and they're like, we'll try this thing first and we'll see how it goes. I was like, dang it. I was like, I could have had like a dissolved oxygen meter, and because I mentioned that too. I was like, it'd be fun to like do some cool YouTube content with this thing. I think I could really get some cool stuff out of it. And they were like, we'll see what happens. But they did
That's
not
another thing
return.
I'm planning on doing too, is just how much oxygen adding during initial, uh, like building your must, basically.
Yeah.
How much oxygen that's added, how that affects fermentation. So basically, just get one where you kind of pour it in, you just stir the honey in, so that way it's not a whole lot getting in there.
Right.
Another one where you're just whipping it around, and then a third one where you're just straight using it like a paint mixer to blend it up real good.
Right.
And potentially like a fourth one where I'm doing like a pump over with my little pump system like I normally do.
Yeah.
And, test each one for different oxygen levels, let them ferment. And, in the end, make them all the same recipe out of the same bucket of honey, water, and everything. And then have people come in and be like, can you taste the difference?
Right.
And then also during the fermentation, the smell, because, oxygen and yeast and science.
Yeah. I remember when I first started, I had read all this stuff about oxygen. So I bought like a brewing pump that had an oxygen stone at the end, and I was like so diligent at the beginning to put that oxygen stone in for like 2 or 3 hours. Like, and hindsight, maybe it did stuff. I don't really know, honestly. That my first like probably 20 batches were not great. And I'm not going to blame it on that necessarily, but
Yeah.
I remember reading that being like, oh my gosh, I have to, and this was before I had my drill mixer. So I was just shaking things up, and it was, just a pain. So now I have my drill mixer, and I just, like you said, go to town and just sit there 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just holding that trigger down and just letting it go crazy. So that's also a fun video. I can't wait to see those. That'll be good research for the mead community. There's a lot of stuff that, a lot of myths and a lot of things that we create, whether it be by people just brazenly saying things online, or people just not knowing in general. And so like there's a lot of myths to be busted for the mead community. And a while back you would, I'm going to bring this up, and I know it might be stirring a little drama in your world. You had started on a little bit of a Bochet sort of deep dive on all that, and I'm sure that's been put a little bit on hiatus because of current events, meadery planning and things. But I do remember you had kind of started to deep dive a little bit into like the bochet process and how it affects honey and fermentation and all those things. So that was,
Yeah.
you're getting sciencey.
The video for that, because anybody who knows about my videos, they know that I've done everything on my phone. Like literally all of my videos, all my recordings, everything was done on my phone. And then had a video editing program on my phone that I did all my video editing, transitions, music, everything. Well, we were on vacation, and my phone is water resistant up to it's like 35 feet or something like that.
Right.
My wife's like, her phone was overheating because we were out in the sun, so it wouldn't let her do anything. She's like, let me use your phone real quick. She's gonna skim the top of the water, take video underneath the water, and I was like, all right, cool, whatever. Everything was fine. As soon as she got out of the water, handed it back to me, like opened it up, and just had the typical message, you got water in your port, dry before charging. I was like, all right, cool, whatever. And then it went on the fritz. Lost that entire video. I lost 3 videos. And I was like, oh. And so trying to recreate those videos, I was like, this is a long process. Yeah. So I ended up posting my results on the Discord.
Yeah.
Because I at least had that information that I was like, hey, look, here's what I found out.
Well, and that's what matters too. I think, as much as I've done with videos and testing, I think people just want to see some end results of things. That's kind of the end thing. So finding your findings specifically and what you found there. But you're doing a lot of, on YouTube especially, it sounds like you're doing a lot of scientific-y stuff that is going to be really translatable to your meadery. And it's going to be fun to see you take all of these ideas and actually implement them into something. And I really hope that we can make this 2 or 3 months from now or 4 months from now, whatever it is, when you're kind of hitting your next steps with the meadery, we can kind of meet back up and say, all right, so here's what we talked about last time. What are some things that you've still experienced, and oh my gosh, wait, what's new? How's the building going and stuff like that? Because this is going to be an ongoing process, and I hope it's simple. I hope that there are very few little stumbling blocks in front of you. Obviously, real life is going to be tough, though. Yeah,
there's like I said, there's every time I turn a corner, there's something new that I'm having to do that nobody explained to me, and it really comes down to your location.
Yeah.
Or even if I went next door to another meadery, or like down the road from another meadery, same city or whatever, something's going to be different. I'm going to run into some roadblock. Like I just found out I have to run 2 newspaper ads saying I'm opening a meadery in this location.
Whoa.
2 of them, not just one, or even put it online. No, it has to be 2 ads in a newspaper.
Huh.
So it can't be the same time. It has to be like a week apart or something like that.
So the community can just know that it's happening, or is it so that they can revolt and have time to come attack you? What's the situation there?
I never got a clear answer as to why, because I have to put a notice, even though it's not being zoned, we still have to put, when we apply for our TTB license and our TABC license, we have to put a notice on the property that we apply for a license to serve alcohol.
Okay. Interesting.
So not only do you have to put it on your property, you also have to put it in the newspaper. And then now we have to actually, because it's in the city, but it's zoned as county. Which the county is like, there's no regulations, but you got to get the city's approval as well. But it doesn't matter if the city approves it or not. And I was like, then why do we have to do it? Oh, it's just a courtesy thing. That part I understand, but it's just nobody told me about this until you're calling people, trying to get information. So luckily for me, I'm a very approachable person, especially when it comes to having to do something professional. You know, because I've worked in a highly professional industry before this, where you're talking to people that normal people don't get to talk to. So, you know, I've learned how to talk with people. Yes, sir. Hey, how you doing? I'm Carlos. I'm here to do this. I'm here to do that. And so when I have to be professional, hey, you know, I'm here. I'm trying to get some information. Can you help me out? Because I've talked to one lady. She's like, "You're so polite. Thank you." She's like, "You just made my day." Just by being nice, like, "I appreciate all your help. Thank you so much." And she's like, "I literally got off the phone with the dude who was yelling at me because his stuff wasn't going through." She's like, "I have no control over it, but he's yelling at me." I'm like, "There's no point.
Right.
You're going to get further being nicer to somebody." And she might know somebody like, "Hey, I just talked to this guy. He needs a little help. Can you?" Well, guess what? I'll get my stuff approved and the dude's still yelling on the phone.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you know, that's one of those things. It feels like if anybody's listening to this going, I'm ready to take the next steps. Part of the process is to probably ask more questions specific to where you're at. And maybe even before you get to that point, not to say you did anything wrong. I'm just saying that this is highlighting the issue that every single location is different. And you might have to run an ad in your little town that you're building your thing in, or you might have to navigate certain waters and talk to certain people before you can do this and this and this. So like asking questions and then just being ready to be on your toes with whatever thing's going to be thrown at you. Sounds like there's just a constant level of surprise and you just have to react and keep going forward.
And be ready to make a lot of phone calls and do a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Because I've read, like I said, I've looked in 7 different cities trying to find a location for this meadery, and I've had to read 239 pages of zoning regulations for each city.
Man.
Parking spaces, front, you know, if you're in certain areas, certain districts, your storefront has to look a certain way, you know, and it's just the design, the layout, you know. Then like here, only 40% of the whole building space can be the tap room. Everything else has to be, you know, the restrooms, the back, the production areas, and everything else, storage. So only 40% of your entire space can be a tap room.
Interesting, huh?
So that went into the whole design plan as well for the building. So,
wow. Well, I'm excited for you. I know that this is still like, you know, we talked about ethereal land at the beginning. You're like ethereal land is like landing down. You're finally getting to the point where you see the little light at the end of the tunnel. You have a drawn map of what this place is going to look like, and I'm excited to see what it's going to be like, even just in 3 or 4 months. Even if they've laid down a concrete slab and they've got, you know, all of that ready to go. I think this is such a cool thing. And I'm hopeful that people are gaining some insight to what it means to start a meadery if you are interested in this. Again, Carlos is going to be back in the future to update us even further, talk about the maybe new struggles he's had, or, you know, talk about the previous ones, stuff like that. But we are definitely here to encourage you. And I know that we can't buy any bottles at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and put any link I can to support you. I know obviously your YouTube channel is one, but if there's anything else, we will gladly support you in any way we can as you're going through these endeavors. So
coming back, you know, if you want me to come back in a couple months, I'm totally here for that. But if you want to stay up to date on how things are going and see how things are moving along, I'll be updating my Instagram as things progress as well.
Oh yeah.
So once they dig the foundation out, you're going to see a picture where the foundation is to start getting a general idea of what it's going to look like. Concrete and plumbing and everything. Yeah, there's going to be pictures upon pictures. So
that's awesome.
I'm kind of documenting the whole process and starting to build the hype, basically. So
yeah, dude, that's so cool. I'm excited to see that too. Like just going from idea to reality is going to be fun. But Carlos, thanks for sitting down. I know many of you don't know this, but Carlos is a man of many kids and a wife, and so he has committed some time away from his family to hang out with us this evening. So thank you for hanging out and talking about the Meadery. I can definitely say everyone listening should be excited or is excited about what's happening here, because we're ready to support you, and I am definitely ready to buy some mead off you. You've been gracious enough to share it with me, and I've loved that personally. But also, I'm very ready to hand you my money and say, I want some more. So, get it on demand in a way.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'll be putting all of this stuff below: his Instagram, the YouTube channel, all those things for Texas Longhouse Mead. Go support him, and we will be back. You can catch up and stay with him on that Instagram, but we will definitely be back in the future to talk more. So, Carlos, thanks, man. I think you're drinking a beer there. It looks like a beer, right? Or mead.
This is actually a mead from Breaking Brew Meadery.
Oh, sweet.
It's
I wonder what it was.
Raspberry beret.
Oh, looks good. Well, a perfect thing to cheers to. Cheers, my man.
Drink with honor.
See you next time.
Have a good one.